Good morning, friends. It's Sunday, May the 3rd, 2020. I can't believe I had to look up the date on my phone before I started recording, but these are the times we are living in. Today, I'm going to conduct an experiment, which is twofold. Number one, I am going to try out this machine that I picked up at a nearly new store, and actually it was brand new. It had been a store demo. It had all the wraps on the cords and the different tape and what have you that you would normally see when you buy something brand new. It is a Bosch Universal Plus 800 watt. I paid $25 Canadian plus tax for it, so it was $28, I guess. And they retail for significantly more, like in the hundreds of dollars. So I've been a big fan of baking bread for many years. This is a loaf that I made on April 26th, and it is a homemade white bread, no knead recipe. Been using this recipe ever since lockdown started, and it's worked out really well. I've shared the recipe with friends. They've all had great luck. However, I've never really truly made proper bread from scratch. I had a bread maker for years. I had to get rid of it for reasons I don't want to get into. Anyway, so today's experiment is to see how this is versus a proper homemade kneaded, and I'm not kneading it by hand. I'm going to use this because apparently this is what this machine is actually for. Mostly is it's known for making great bread. So we are using a recipe from The Joy of Cooking, and in my particular case the recipe is on page 603. And it is just standard white bread. So we have our ingredients assembled, which are a cup of scalded milk, a cup of water, 2 tablespoons of butter, 2 tablespoons of sugar, a tablespoon of salt, and a tablespoon of shortening or lard. Although I do have lard in the house because hubby bought it by accident, I couldn't bring myself to do it. So I've gone ahead and I have scalded my milk, and it says to add the 1 cup of water. Okay. The shortening and the lard or the butter, the shortening or the lard and the butter, the sugar, 2 tablespoons, the salt, 1 tablespoon. Alright, what I have here is a 1/4 cup of just water from the tap, and it's heated up to between 110 and 115 degrees Fahrenheit. Oh, it just went down to 109. Anyway, we're going to put in 2 1/4 teaspoons of yeast. Give it a bit of a stir, and we have to let that sit for 3 to 5 minutes. A little bit about yeast. I've mostly used either bread machine yeast, or for the no-knead sandwich bread, I've been using either Fleischmann's Traditional or Fleischmann's Quick Rise. I realized that for half the price, I could, even with the $10 shipping charge, I've been buying this InstaFerm online. It works out to about half the price. So just so you know, one of these packets in Canada is 8 grams, and there are 2 1/4 teaspoons inside each one of these pouches. So you need the equivalent of 1 pouch, which is 2 1/4 teaspoons. Okay, so as per the recipe, I've put the first 3 cups of flour in the mixer, along with my liquid mixture, which consists of the scalded milk, the fat, the sugar, and the salt. And then I put in my 1/4 cup of water that had set with yeast in it for 3 to 5 minutes. I did do the 5 minutes just to be sure. So I'm going to put the lid on this and turn it on and see what happens. Is that tight? I don't think so, and it's really hard to do this with one hand. All right. After beating the dough on power level 2 for 1 minute, this is what it looks like. So those were the instructions to beat it for 1 minute. I am going to add in the other 3 1/4 cups of flour, and I do apologize. I had to get up on a step stool to film from this angle, and because I'm short. So I'm going to dump in the other 3 1/2 cups of flour. Maybe I'll do that off camera because it's really hard to do it with one hand. You know what? I have new respect for people who film tutorials all the time. Either they have really great equipment, a lot of patience, or they're much taller than I am. Regardless, I've added in the other 3 1/4 cups of flour. I've reattached the lid. I'm going to turn it on to power level 2 for 5 minutes. It says to turn it out on a floured board and knead until smooth and elastic and air bubbles form. So I'll turn this on to power level 2 and set the timer for 5 minutes, and we'll see how she looks in 5 minutes. Hi there. Okay, so far this bread recipe from The Joy of Cooking is an unmitigated disaster. I'm starting to think that I should have specifically searched for a recipe that utilized Canadian flour. I remember from when I had a bread maker, there was always instructions for Canadian flour versus American flour, and I think that's part of the problem. What I did was, because honestly, after about 4 minutes of kneading and the machine was jumping around, had a good look at it and realized that it was the consistency of pie dough. That's not what you want. So I carefully added some water, but the thing is it never really formed that nice smooth dough ball that you're looking for. After kneading it for probably about 10 minutes altogether, I finally gave up. I put it in this bowl. I'm going to cover it and leave it for an hour, and we'll see what happens. I am not hopeful. Plus, so far I am really thinking that the no-knead sandwich bread recipe that I've been using is the better choice. I've got so much mess. This involved, you know, scalding milk in a pot, which I had to clean. I'll take you over here. The mess in the sink is a lot, so I have to clean that up. Whereas if I use the other recipe, no harm, no foul. Let's wait 90 minutes and see what happens. I've been doing a little bit of research, and this will not focus, of course. Be that as it may. If you look at this recipe here in The Joy of Cooking, it says 6 1/2 cups of flour, and there is only 2 1/4 cups of liquid. Whereas this recipe, which is specifically Canadian, and I know it's not in focus, sorry about that, 5 cups of flour, 2 cups of milk. So the ratio is completely and utterly different. We're going to see how this bread proofs up, but I think it's probably a lost cause. This bread dough has been rising for about half an hour, and it is definitely rising, but boy, does it ever look, I don't even know what it looks like. It's okay. I realize I shouldn't be poking it too much, but it is developing air bubbles. It's becoming somewhat more elastic. It just didn't form that lovely ball that bread dough should form. So I'm a little concerned. When the timer goes off, I'm going to punch it down, turn it over, I think, and let it rise for another 90 minutes. I'm going to follow the old-fashioned routine. Then I'm going to pan it and let it rise for another, I think, 45 minutes. So this is why making bread from scratch the proper way can be a bit of a pain. But I just want to see how it compares to my quick, no-knead, plain white sandwich bread. And also next weekend, I'm going to be doing old-fashioned Newfoundland homemade white bread. And as I mentioned previously, the proportions are completely different. So at the end of the day, we can compare the three and see what squeezes out at the end. It's been an hour and a half, 90 minutes, and this is what we have. This is our first rising. Now, it's not horrible. Oops, that's not on camera. It's not horrible, but it's not great. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to punch it down, which I'm kind of enjoying in a weird way. I was considering kneading this by hand, but I decided against it. I'm just going to go with the recipe and go with what the machine did. So yeah, I suck at filming and I do apologize for that. So I really do think that most people who post on YouTube have A, really great equipment, and B, maybe somebody helping them. But that's not the case. I mean, I could get my daughter to hold the camera, but, oh, sorry, there's my phone chirping. However, anyway, this is punched down. I'm going to punch it and play with it a bit more, let it rise for another 90 minutes. We'll see what we're left with. I'm not loving the consistency, but I've been wrong before, so let's see what happens. After 90 minutes, the dough has doubled again. It looks a little better now than it did before. So I'm going to put it into 2 pans and let it rise again for 40 minutes, and then I'll bake it. Now, speaking of pans, I've been using these 2 Teflon coated pans for years and years. They started to peel, so I threw them out. So I am going to use these 2 because that's what I have. And it'll also be interesting to see what happens when I use the metal pan versus the glass pan. Theoretically, they should be baked at different temperatures. But I'm going to bake them at the same temperature, what is recommended in the recipe, and we'll see how they come out. These have been rising for 45 minutes. Actually, they have risen for the 3rd time, and that's awesome. The one on the left in the metal pan versus the one on the right in the glass pan. Clearly, I didn't divide the dough proportionately. However, let's just bake them off. The oven is heated up to 450, and we are going to put them in for 10 minutes on 450, lower the heat to 350, and cook for 30 to 35 minutes. Take them out and immediately get them out of the pans, let them cool. We'll see what the result is. Here's the bread fresh out of the oven, so 10 minutes on 450 and 30 minutes on 350, total of 40 minutes. I'm not that impressed. It's bumpy, it feels hard. If you look at it from the side, there's just all these breaks in the loaf. We'll see when it cools down and it gets cut, but for now, so far, not impressed. Alright, so the bread is cool, and I've cut the heel, as we call it, off the smaller loaf. And as you can see, it just does not have the same lovely texture as the other one. It's a very dense loaf, whereas this one is nice and springy and squishy. It's got the squish factor. And if you look at the texture, you can see the openings where the yeast developed and the air got trapped. I don't really know the science, so I mean, perhaps somebody can explain it a little better than me. Regardless, I'm not that impressed with this loaf. I'm going to let hubby try the heel. He is a brawny Scottish lad, and he knows his bread, so we'll let him try it. I will say one other thing, and that is this versus this was a lot more time consuming to make. It made a lot of mess in the kitchen, a lot more things to wash and clean up or throw in the dishwasher. It also cost between 35 and 40 cents more than this to produce. and just all the rising times. Now I did let this rise 3 times as per the instructions, but it's like a rock. It's like a doorstop. It just, like, listen. I'll bang this one down versus bang this one down with the same amount of force, and you can hear the difference. I'm not impressed. Maybe there's something we can do with it. Maybe we can use it to make French toast. Maybe we can feed the geese that live just over the fence in our backyard in front of the pond. I don't know. Not impressed. I'm going to try the Newfoundland recipe next weekend, but I mean, anybody can see the difference. It just didn't have a nice rise. It's too dense. There's no air pockets that have formed. It's too dense. Now, maybe in some circles, this is the desirable outcome. It's also like a moon rock on top. I mean, look at that. And the crust isn't nice versus this one where, yes, there's some variation in the surface, but it's just got a nice, thin, crispy crust. This is what you want in a bread. I mean, in a bakery, of course, all the loaves are perfectly formed and everything's lovely and perfect. For a home loaf, this is not bad looking. I'm sure if I had taken any time at all in forming it, it would have been nicer. But literally, this is just plop the ingredients, mix them up, let it rise once in the bowl, let it rise once in the pan, stick it in the oven. There's no futzing about with mixers and, you know, all these implements. So right now I'm leaning towards the easy version. It tastes great, it's easy to make, and it's more economical by about 20 cents a loaf. Okay, so hubby did the taste test, and his assessment was that it's more than edible, but it was quite dense. It had a good flavor profile. However, it's not as nice and airy as the one on the right. So, all things considered, the quick method, the non-knead method, is the way to go. I mean, he mowed it down. Mind you, I put a lot of butter on it, so butter makes everything better. Did you hear him smirk in the background? Anyway, my final thoughts on this are that to save time, money, and to achieve a better loaf, for this particular comparison, go the no-knead method.